Welcome back to the next session, Plenary. Mic. Welcome back. This is what is meant to happen. You're meant to hold a microphone. Welcome back to Plenary Session 1. Hope you had a good break and that you as well were enriched by the beginning of this very important online and slightly live conference. The session now, we're looking at GCED in the digital world that connects and divides. I think we're going to have a fascinating discussion today with 4 people who each provide some unique and important insight into the challenges and possibilities of that GCED faces in this digital era. And some of it was raised already in the first session, and what we're going to hear from our four guests is really going to build on that. We'll hear from Janice Richardson in a pre-recorded speech, who will introduce us to UNESCO guidelines for teachers on global citizenship education in a digital age. And Janice was involved in writing this process and these guidelines, so I think it'll be great to hear from her. We'll hear from Elton Grizel, who will be zooming in, as many of you are, and he'll talk about media and information literacy, and we'll also introduce UNESCO's MIL curriculum. Pik Cho, sitting on my left, will look at why socio-emotional learning is so important at this time in the face of digital transformation. And then finally, we'll hear from Lisa van Wyk at the end, who will draw back the curtain on the internet and challenge some of the assumptions we have about this digital era. As was the case in the previous sessions and will be throughout this conference, audience, those who are joining us online, feel free, and we encourage you to put your questions and your comments in chat box. And I think we'll begin. And so we're going to start with a recorded speech by Janice Richardson, who is the International Advisor for Insights SA. But Janice, because she couldn't be here, she had to record this speech, but she did want to express a message of sympathy, which she was not obviously able to do in the speech that she recorded. So I'd like to begin by reading Janice's email that she sent through. She said, "I would like to express my sympathy to the Korean people further to the awful happenings and the loss of life last weekend. I hope that you and your loved ones have not been intimately impacted." So we'll now hear from Janice Richardson, the International Advisor for Insights SA.
Good afternoon, participants and experts. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Today I'm going to talk about global citizenship education, the opportunities that this can open for students, the challenges that the digital transformation has brought to us, and some of the next steps that we could take. First, let's look at the risks. I'm going to break these down into 3 buckets: connection, content, and behavior. First, connection, or perhaps non-connection, because we have to take into consideration that 2.9 billion people are not online, and most of them in developing countries. This causes digital exclusion, but it also causes exclusion from many work opportunities, social opportunities. The gender divide is also very important and not improving with time. Why is it so important that women are also part of this? Well, 1, to make sure their perspective is taken into account, but 2, they're mothers and very often teachers. And if this gender divide persists, young people will not be educated as they need to be. Over the pandemic, we've seen that there is also a social divide, a divide between families who can support their children when they're learning online, learning autonomously, and those who don't have the capacity, the language skills, or whatever. And also, we should think about our impact on sustainability. Around 3% of the carbon footprint worldwide is generated by our use of digital technology. When we look at content, accountability is reduced through the anonymity. This has given rise to fake news, to many difficulties that only education can counteract. Authenticity is undermined. When we watch young people on social media and see all of the many possibilities they have to filter their contents, to change the contents of others, it does require a whole lot more accountability and a much better knowledge of rights and responsibilities. Reflection time is reduced, which means that we can very easily take for the truth something that really has no credibility. Profiling also limits plurality and promotes discrimination. And of course, when we receive something disturbing online, the impact is increased. There's not always someone around us who can support us. We don't all have the resilience necessary. If we look at behavior, once again, because the reflection time is reduced, many young people and older people behave as they wouldn't normally in a face-to-face situation. The impact can be high, the impact also on self-esteem. Another aspect is mobility. In certain countries, a large percentage of online activity is mobile. How is it possible to guide young users when supervision is rendered difficult by the size of the device and the mobility? Privacy, an issue raised very often. Data has become a consumer product, but we mustn't forget also the physical impact that technology has on users, ergonomy, eyesight, sleeping, etc. And finally, when we look at Internet of Things, AI, and wearables, we realize that there are so many sensors open to the outside world that vulnerabilities are increased. We did some interesting research in Germany during the time of the school closures to ask how young people learned, or rather, where they learned. You can see an overwhelming majority will use YouTube and Wikipedia over the resources provided by the school. Interestingly, you'll see also, where did they learn? Who did they learn with? Well, most learned with brothers, sisters, friends, which really underlines the fact that today learning is multi-stakeholder. We have family, we have peer group, we have schools, but we also overwhelmingly have media. Reflection time reduced, and we know that live streaming accounts for about 80% of global traffic today. I already mentioned mobile technology, but almost 70% of traffic in Africa is mobile. Critical thinking is also hampered by language when more than half the content online is in English, and yet there are so many other languages in the world. Veracity and plurality of information is lost because information is unbundled. We used to read in a newspaper many different things on a single page and get a much better overview of the importance of the information and the articles we're reading. This has been lost through profiling, through channeling people into the media which suits their profile. With the Internet of Things, we lose a lot of control over what we're doing and what is happening to our data and security. Once again, social, physical ergonomics, but I would really like to emphasize the neural impact of digital learning. Digital technology impacts the way knowledge is formed, the way it is produced, the way it is integrated, and the whole process of learning. And this has to be taken into account. In 2020-21, we did a survey with 21,000 parents in 45 different countries to understand what are the biggest problems that they're encountering with their children online. The first comes as no surprise: protecting privacy, the privacy of their children, but also the privacy of those interacting with their children. Secondly, rights and responsibilities, which so many people online just don't understand. Thirdly, security, avoiding spam, viruses, malware, and phishing. And then lastly, behavior, also a great concern for parents. So how do we turn these risks into opportunities? We must remember that literacy today is far more complex than it used to be. We need functional literacy, those 3 R's that we used to talk about, but we also need digital literacy, because if children don't have control, full control of the tools they use, then they become far less resilient. Media and information literacy. A lot of ink has been spilled on this over the last 10, 15 years. It's more important than ever, given deep fake and other means of warping information. However, all of this needs to be topped with social emotional literacy. Dealing with others, interacting online is more complex than face-to-face. And this brings us a whole lot of competences necessary. We must teach children, educators must think about new modes of collaboration, of communication. Problem solving is essential today, but also creativity, which is considered by the World Economic Forum as one of the 5 most necessary skills for the future. But then we need to think about protecting our privacy. We need to build the resilience of young people. And all of this must be underpinned by democracy, human rights, but also sustainability of information, of knowledge, and of our planet. In 1996, a UNESCO commission led by Jacques Delors underlined the importance of the 4 pillars of education, of learning to know, of learning to do, of learning to be, and learning to live together. I've just come off a meeting about artificial intelligence in education. And once again, these 4 pillars have been underlined as the essence of education. At the Council of Europe, the 4 pillars are in fact dealt with in another way. Learning to know becomes knowledge, critical understanding. To do, skills. Learning to be are the values that guide us in our behavior. And learning to live together, our attitudes towards others. Here we take a closer look. What are the competences involved? What should we know in terms of knowledge, critical understanding? It's so important to understand oneself, to understand language and communication, but then to understand the world. That's very much a part of global citizenship. Skills, autonomous learning skills. We've been talking for many years now about lifelong learning, but the essential, the key to this is really learning to listen, to observe, to cooperate, to resolve conflict, and to have empathy towards others. Valuing human rights, human dignity, cultural diversity, valuing democracy, justice, fairness, equality, and the rule of law. These are the values that need to guide us to be global citizens. And finally, our attitudes. If we are going to be a global citizen, we have to be open to others and to cultural otherness, to other beliefs, worldviews, practices. And these have to be underpinned by respect, by civic-mindedness, responsibility, self-efficacy, and tolerance of ambiguity. When we began writing the teacher guidelines for global citizenship education, we went through past documents and very recent documents to understand what has been written, where can we find those resources that are going to guide us in the right way. Many from UNESCO, but also from the Council of Europe. There's the Internet Literacy Handbook and the Digital Citizenship Education Handbook. But of course, essentially, if we're going to change things in education, we have to look at what is innovation, how do you guide balanced innovation in a school? And although this was published as a guide to innovation back almost 15 years ago, I think it still holds, and it's still one of the underpinning elements of the teacher guidelines for global citizenship education. What did we learn from this recent publication from the UNESCO Commission for Futures in Education? Well, first of all, we need to build the capabilities of individuals to work together to shape just, peaceful, and sustainable futures. we have to accept that there are many different ways of knowing and being, and we have to integrate these into education. We also need to counteract the backsliding in democratic governance by showing young people and letting them live participation and activism. And all educators must be fully aware of the transformative power of digital technology in both negative and positive aspects. There are many challenges of AI, automation, and structural changes, but we need to adopt these to create a human-centered socio-economic arena. Preparing children and young people, this is the role of educators. Young people need to become informed, accountable, and have agency to tackle issues that will help make the world more sustainable. They need to be able to articulate content on tangible, meaningful goals. And I chose for the teacher guidelines to global citizenship to choose the SDGs, because I think these open lots of opportunities to talk about citizenship in schools. We need, as I've just said, to build on knowledge, experience, and resources developed over the past decades, encompass digital literacy, media and information literacy, and digital citizenship into this whole broad concept of global citizenship. And we should benefit from the input of a wide group of stakeholders, because today, children are educated by the media, they're educated by their peers, and we need to involve all of these people when we're talking about developing an education curriculum. It's very important that all of the key competences are included in the in the global citizenship guidelines. And also, we need to find ways to trigger the creativity of teachers and students with technology, but also without technology, because the teacher guidelines can be adapted as well in Africa, in places where there is no internet, as in the most highly equipped schools. So as I said, we've moved from functional information literacy through to media literacy and digital literacy until we arrive at global citizenship, which is in fact about understanding rights and responsibilities online, understanding the impact of digital on identity and the interconnectedness of online and offline. It's also about analyzing, learning to critically evaluate information, the impact of our actions on the sustainability of the planet and of digital technology in all facets of our life, as well as understanding how to build resilience to disinformation. We want our young people to be socially responsible, to adopt the ethical values and attitudes in local, global, and virtual environments, but also to reject intolerance and all forms of discrimination. Creativity, innovation is so important, and the teacher guidelines try to support teachers in helping young people use media creatively and innovatively, and apply their skills in practical ways to solve problems and to produce interesting, meaningful outputs. And the whole role of being a citizen is to participate actively in society. The teacher guidelines offer many ways that young people and learners of all ages can take an active role in global and virtual communities to overcome challenges. The guidelines are broken down into 4 parts. In the first part, global citizenship, education in a digital age, we talk about what global citizenship education, GCED, is, the power of digital, why global citizenship matters, the purpose of the guidelines and who they're for. In the second part, we talk about the competencies for global citizenship, the digital component of global citizenship, but also how media and information literacy fits in as a building block in the learning agenda. Creativity, a catalyst for problem solving and innovation, and social and emotional learning, which is of course, a foundation stone of resilience. Part 3 looks at the impact of digital technology on teaching and learning. We look at the new role for educators. We help them apprehend new modes of communication, show how they can promote students' freedom of expression while countering hate speech, and tap into the potential of students' engagement for the Sustainable Development Goals. We show how to use the learning modules and give an overview of the learning objectives. And finally, a whole section, almost half the publication, is dedicated to learning modules on the Sustainable Development Goals. Here, of course, we're all familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals and the great importance of quality education, which is what this is all about. We took the Sustainable Goals to young people in several regions of the world, in Africa, in the Caribbean, in Europe, in Asia, and we asked young people, for you, which are the SDGs that you would like to work on in school? This was the result in the word cloud here. You see, they consider quality education really to be the key to everything. And this is purely the opinion of the young people we consulted. Climate action comes as no surprise. Reducing inequalities, gender inequality, zero hunger. And therefore, these are the 6 SDGs that we chose as the cornerstones for the learning module. So what is a learning module? All of the learning modules aim to tackle the 4 pillars. They are central to them. Learning to know, getting young people, getting learners to reflect on our human needs, on our goals, the impact that they can be having on the planet, to acquire knowledge from multiple sources about other people, other countries, other communities, so that they get a multi-perspective view on challenges. Understand, compare, contrast information from maps, tables, and other graphic representations, so that they are really able to interpret this knowledge, interpret the information which is being generated through digital technology and with technology. We encourage them to use learning materials and implement materials in new and concrete situations, to develop skills for critical thinking, research, analysis, and to navigate in the on and offline world, and how to use digital tools to interpret and represent data in graphic and other formats. It's about listening, observing, in order to be an active communicator, developing the confidence and the respect of human dignity and knowledge and acceptance of our own strengths and our own weaknesses, and developing attitudes of empathy, solidarity, and respect for differences. And finally, learning to live together, developing those skills for positive interactions with educators, with other learners, with the community, and fostering shared values and responsibilities that are based on human rights and a sense of belonging to a common humanity, and embracing and promoting cultural diversity. These are the elements that are central to the teacher guidelines. How the learning modules broken down? Well, we begin with subject areas and keywords, key facts. Why? Because if we can attach global citizenship education to the subjects already in the curriculum, integrate them meaningfully, it is going to be much easier for teachers to be able to teach about GCED. Next, there is a section on understanding the goals of SDGs, the misconceptions, our rights and responsibilities, and foster search for information. Analyzing, by getting them to reflect and critically analyze, to cross-check, to hone their mill competences, but also to unravel those myths, deconstruct the representations and the prejudices that they've already integrated through media and through other ways, and to overcome the pitfalls of digital technology in our lives. We try in the next section to help them understand what it means to be socially responsible by allowing them, enabling them to investigate their own behavior and attitudes in the various environments, including local, global, and virtual, but always with an ethical lens, always helping them work collaboratively to solve problems. Creation, innovation, not just innovating and creating directly, but also developing a deeper cultural understanding, letting them experiment with media, but also understand the ways that media and art can be used as a form of expression. This helps develop lateral thinking skills and appreciate diversity. And finally, and this is my favorite part, participate. This is living global citizenship. It's meaningful, making meaningful connections with the private sector, with civil society, understanding ways that we can contribute and build our skills through this contribution, but also measure the impact of our contribution, an area too often lost. In each chapter, there is a breakdown of the skills, of the competences that we are hoping that young people will integrate during the lesson, divided into two areas, upper elementary and secondary school. And each time these correspond closely to publications already made by UNESCO as we look at the cognitive, the socio-emotional, and the behavioral competences that young people should acquire if they're going to be competent global citizens. Looking to tomorrow. Well, firstly, digital challenges are related to behavior rather than technology. And so it's important to think about reflection and introspection rather than just awareness raising. Online well-being calls for a multi-stakeholder approach involving all of the influences, the family, the school, the peers, the media. 21st century literacy is multifaceted. It includes social, emotional, and cultural literacy. And learning must always be learner-centered, meaningful, engaging, intrinsically motivating, flexible, and fostering self-evaluation and advocacy. We have to make the school more attractive, the educational environment more attractive when we look at the way young people are spending such a large amount of their time in social media and other areas on internet. And lastly, global citizenship can't be an add-on. It needs to be the golden thread that's woven right through formal and informal education at home and at school. I'm going to finish with some of the ideas that young people gave me when I asked them, what is the internet to you? From Spain, Noella, when she was 17, underlined that we need to build on the empathy and humanity of people to counter the online threats, always the threats. It is at the top of the mind of young people. For Teresa, who is now in her third year of medical studies, it should be a safe, inspirational, unrestricted place where everyone can explain their own opinions or thoughts without being exposed to abuse and excessively critical comments of others. Yao from Portugal, it means inclusion of diversity that is essential to combat the negative things like hate speech and racism. And from a young person in Greece, she sees it something like a puzzle where each person from all over the world can share a piece of knowledge to build a world full of information that's constantly updated and corrected, supplemented until it's valid. That is the end of my presentation for you, and I'm so sorry that I can't be here with you today. I do hope that I will receive your questions and have an opportunity to have an email exchange to respond to them. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Janice. I believe you are watching as well, and I just echo the invitation that Janice put out to email her with questions. I think she's easy to track down, otherwise ask AppSeeU. But thank you, Janice, for introducing us to an important document that both gives some guidelines that are much needed at this time, but also, crucially, some practical tools to equip teachers and learners to navigate this, this digital era. And also a good insight into the 4 SDGs that young people are more passionately drawn to. Next, we're going to hear from Elton Grizzle, who's joining us online, who's the program specialist for media and information literacy and media development at UNESCO. So let's pass on to hear from Elton. Elton, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Dylan. It's a real pleasure to join this 7th International Conference on the Global Citizenship Education Platform and Pedagogy and Practice. It comes on the heels of Global Media and Information Literacy Week, which maybe some of the listeners were following. Global Media and Information Literacy Week is celebrated every year from the 24th to the 31st of October. And the theme for this year was Nurturing Trust in Media and Information Literacy Imperative. So, real pleasure to be here. As I listened to Janice's presentation just now, I couldn't help but to be reminded of a edict principle that I learned on a research study while I was in India, in Punjabi, at the Punjabi University. I was on a research study there a few years ago. In my research, I was doing some in-depth study around the father of information science. At least he's known as the father of information science in India and big parts of Asia and other parts of the world, S.R. Ranganathan. And he developed an edict principle that he called Eka Vakita. Eka Vakita. And what that means is that all knowledge is connected. All knowledge is connected. So I couldn't help but to be reminded of that edict principle as Janice presented, because some 70, maybe 80% of what Janice shared, very important competencies around transforming education are in fact, what we call media and information literacy as well. So you will hear me echoing some of what Janice said, but with slightly different perspective. But again, all knowledge is connected. And I think this is a very fundamental principle around learning and pedagogy and transforming education. I will be talking to you for the next 20 minutes around media and information literacy for global citizenship. Some will say digital citizenship. In UNESCO, of course, we talk about global citizenship education. And we also recognize that there are other concepts relating to education for sustainable development, which again is connected to the competencies that we're saying are urgent for the 21st century. Now, just take a look at what happens on the internet in a minute for a few seconds. This was statistic taken from 2007. On Facebook alone, over 900,000 logins, 16 million text messages. On YouTube, in 1 minute, 4.1 million views, video viewed, all right? If you look at LinkedIn, over 120 new accounts created in a minute, 156 million emails sent. But look also at, okay, let me see my slide, okay. Look at these statistics, and 4 years after, that was 2017, I just showed you, 4 years after, in the heights of the COVID-19 pandemic, how these statistics grew exponentially. So we see in Facebook 1.3 million login per minute. Of course, if you recall from the previous slide, it was 900,000. 19 million text messages sent in a minute, and 190 million emails. Literally exponential increase in 3 to 4 years. And the pandemic reminds us of how people are increasingly connected, but also increasingly becoming dependent on digital technology. We can see a close to 30, in some case 40% and 50% increase in the sort of activities that happen on the internet in a minute. Now, I'd like you to reflect for a moment on a world transformed into digital technology. This is the map of our world. It's a very old map, in fact, one I came across some 12 years ago in Germany in a conference on youth protection and rights online, yeah, some 13 years ago. And I was quite intrigued by this map. I tried to update it a little bit, but just reflect for a moment on living in a virtual world. Imagine all of Asia transformed into Facebook or Twitter, or Africa transformed into Instagram, and Spotify. Imagine a world where all of the Arab states become the Amazon, online shopping. We are living in a mediated world. Our social life, personal life, economic life, our democratic participation, it's all mediated. Our learning has become mediated. What is happening is that convergence between the virtual world and the physical world. Some argue that the virtual world is a part of the physical world. But in this reality of a mediated world, we are faced with what some theorists are calling design thinking or system thinking, where the design of technology conditions and controls and influences how we think, how we process information, how we analyze information, how we receive and transmit messages. And so we have quite often people who are getting caught in this design thinking. And so they're in their phones scrolling, and they don't realize that they're scrolling for 2 hours, 3 hours, and they're just scrolling and flipping on their mobile devices. And they're investing so many hours, not realizing that they're not in any way transforming their minds. This virtual world, this new information and digital ecology that we're in, brings with it a host of opportunities and challenges. I've listed here 12 different opportunities and challenges, but of course they're by no means exhaustive, and I don't have the time to go through all of them. I was given 20 minutes to give a presentation, and what I will try to do is very much give a bird's eye view of what we're calling media and information literacy. But you have heard it also from the previous speaker. Literacy has been redefined. We can no longer talk about the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, but people need to know how to differentiate between facts and opinion. They need to be able to differentiate between truth and lies. They need to be able to analyze images and videos, and to realize that messages are transmitted through images. We have a situation where consumers have become producers. In the old ecology of the information, we had gatekeepers, we have editors, we have people who were verifying information. We had the librarians. We were dependent on the librarian to ensure that whatever books that is being displayed and made available, these were checked and verified. These were authenticated. This situation has changed. We see where people's social participation and thriving in society is increasingly dependent on technology. Democracy and governance processes are being mediated online. The electoral process, the campaigning process, it's all moving online, again, mediated. And how are people interacting with, for example, their political leaders? How are they interacting with their local government officials? How are they interacting with international development organizations who are critical to governance processes through these mediated technologies, and what sort of competencies do they need in that process. We see a digital world and information ecology where people's perception and beliefs and attitude are being shaped by the information that they receive, by the technology that they invest so much time on. But unfortunately, quite often they're unaware that they are the information that they consume. Media and information literacy enable people to understand how they come to know, how they come to believe, and how they come to, in fact, act and respond to certain social opportunities and challenges. We see situation around increasing user-generated content, legacy media being challenged in terms of viability and sustainability. And we heard a lot of discussion from Janice around privacy and the challenges to people's privacy. In fact, some researchers are suggesting that the last bastion of our privacy, our private thoughts, is being breached by artificial intelligence. And so artificial intelligence using so many parameters to predict how we are going to think and how we're going to respond to certain social opportunities and challenges. There's new challenges to freedom of expression and access to information online, because again, AI, through different criteria, through different parameters and indicators, are channeling people into echo chambers. And so we're seeing only what we want to see. We are seeing only based on our behavior online. And media and information literacy now helps people to understand that they can break out of this echo chamber, that they can unlock their minds, that they can control how information comes to them, that it's not about the information overload through digital technology, but it's about conquering yourself, developing those competencies to understand your information needs, how to search for this information, how to critically analyze it, how to store it, use it, and apply it to your social, economic, and personal life. And finally, media and information looks at the challenge around AI and what are the ethics. The situation with this information and digital ecology, if you can look at this globe and this newspaper clip, you will see one of the headlines topic there, upper atmospheric pollution. Our information ecology is polluted. And if you look to the right of your screen, or maybe it's your left, you will also see another headline that says, what needs to be done? When an information ecology becomes polluted, it needs to be depolluted. One way to do that is through media and information literacy. That pollution brings with it disinformation and misinformation, all right? And we need a vaccine against disinformation and misinformation. And that vaccine is media and information literacy. Researchers have suggested that when we're trying to get information off the internet, it's like taking a drink from a fire hydrant. No question of the benefits of the internet to democratize information, to give people more access to digital technology, to give people more access to public discourse, to give them a voice. But it's so difficult when you have to get information off the internet. It's like drinking water from a fire hydrant. You need ways to be able to sift that information. You need ways to be able to control the flow of information that comes to you. And media and information literacy offer these competencies. And so UNESCO, we have been suggesting that media and information literacy for all is urgent. It's like the climate crisis. The Arctic is melting, and we must take action now to integrate media and information literacy at all levels of education: primary, secondary, tertiary, non-formal, and formal, non-formal, and informal education. The journey has been very long, and as you've seen on your screen and seeing the representation of this elephant walking down a very long road and seeing the mountains that are on the horizon. For some 30 years, 40 years, UNESCO have been involved in promoting media and information literacy. theorists and academicians will tell you that the concepts go back much farther, 50, 60, 70 years ago, you know, promoting and calling for media and information literacy to be at the center of education. We can see this as a long journey, but we can also see the feet of these elephants as, you know, strong pillars to transforming education. When we combine media and information literacy with certain aspects of global citizenship education, with intercultural dialogue, interreligious dialogue, and basic science literacy, media and information literacy, we argue, is a precursor to becoming digital citizenship. You know, it's an antecedent to becoming, you know, culturally competent, you know, to appreciate other cultures, to respect differences in persons' religious beliefs or their desire or their right not to believe anything. It's also a precursor to basic science literacy. We see around the world, and we saw under the COVID-19 pandemic, that the scientific method of inquiry was being, you know, marginalized and challenged, and there was a lot of distrust in scientific facts. Media and information literacy enables and simplify these scientific methods to all people around the world. The New London Group, a research group some time ago, famously observed that if it were possible to define generally the mission of education, it could be said that its fundamental purpose is to ensure that students, citizens benefit from learning in ways that allow them to participate fully in public, community, and economic life. And you see the emphasis on the participate fully in public, community, and economic life, because this is what media and information literacy is about. It's an umbrella concept that covers and includes many notions of literacy. And you can see from your screen, in fact, this diagram, when we started some 12 years ago, and UNESCO developed its first media and information literacy curriculum for teachers, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a few moments. This diagram, we had about 10 or 8 bubbles around the big bubbles. 10 years later, so many other new literacies have cropped up: critical literacy, visual literacy, civic literacy, film literacy, game literacy, social media literacy, data literacy, AI literacy. We have been hearing about AI literacy, and there's a lot of scholarship around that. But in the end, again, coming back to that edict principle, eka vakita, all knowledge are connected. We are talking about the same thing. Do we need, for example, a new literacy that we call conspiracy theory literacy? We don't. It's really the same type of competencies that we're talking about, that people need to become resilient to this malinformation or false information or manipulated information. So UNESCO used this umbrella term, media and information literacy, to encompass an integrated set of information, digital, and media competencies linked to social values, some of the social values that Janice spoke about and that are related to global citizenship education. These social values underlying also need media and information literacy competencies. We need to understand that our brain has a logical component and an emotional component. And how do we find that harmony between our logical thinking and reasoning brain and our emotional thinking and reasoning brain? Media and information literacy offers and is a strong foundation to make that happen. I want to rush on in terms of this presentation. You'll see on your screen a table that makes an attempt to look at the purpose of global citizenship education and the purpose of MAIL, and how these two are strongly related. As I said earlier, some 90% or 80% of what Janice described while she spoke about this resource on global citizenship education is also what we call media and information literacy. So I'll give you one example in the interest of time. So if global citizenship education encourage learners to analyze real life issues critically and to identify possible solutions creatively and innovatively, media and information literacy is a purpose. MIL is about acquiring competencies to critically analyze and engage with real life issues that are reflected and sometimes amplified through media, digital technologies, books, and other platforms. So we see here a almost, linked, a strong link between these two areas. I could go through several more examples, but in the interest of time, I will skip. And I will jump to...
Alton, just to say we have 1 minute left.
We
Sorry
have
to
1
interrupt.
minute left.
Yeah,
okay,
thank you.
wow. So in that 1 minute, I will just go rapidly to speak to some of the work that UNESCO is doing around this area. We have developed policies and strategy guidelines on media and information literacy, pushing for national policies and strategy. Like the Global Citizenship Education Resource, we have developed our new second edition of our media and information literacy curriculum, Thinking Critically, Clicking Wisely. This is a media and information literacy curriculum for education and learners, consisting of about 14 modules covering various issues. We're working with media organizations to integrate media and information literacy as a part of their business model through the media and information literacy curriculum in journalism, doing issues on assessing and monitoring media and information literacy, networking, facilitating networking. I spoke about our global media and information literacy week. Also the UNESCO Media and Information Literacy Alliance, which is a network of networks with members in over 120 countries around the world. And then seeking to innovate, to take learning outside of the classroom and to see the city as a classroom, as a place for learning. As cities are benefiting and embedded with digital technology, and we're talking about smart cities, we cannot have smart cities without media and information literacy cities. We cannot have smart cities without media and information literate citizens. And so we are pushing for innovation and for creative learning in in physical spaces to promote media and information literacy for all. So with that, I stop here and look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Alton. I'm sorry to be the one that had to jump in and interrupt you. I think a few things that stood out for me from what you spoke about. One, in these last slides and with the picture of the elephant on the road, is a reminder that we have these tools. They've been around for a while, and there are a lot of resources that can help us as educators or practitioners or even learners in navigating this digital era. But I think the other two things was that you reminded us that we can break out of the echo chamber, we can take control, and that we have a vaccine, and that vaccine is media and information literacy. And I appreciate, and I'm sure everyone else here does, who's listening online and watching, is this impassioned call for urgency that you've put on the table and reminded us of. So Alton, thank you very much. And again, any questions, please pop them in the chat box or comments you'd like to make about what Alton has raised. I'm going to pass over now to someone who's very well known and respected and loved, I am told, here in Korea, Professor Pek Cho, who is the chair professor of the Institute of General Education at Korea University. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I am very happy to be here to participate in this great conference. And I'm also very happy to follow the two speakers who gave great information. And I'm particularly happy that I speak before the last speaker, Lisa van Wyk, who is the expert in communications. So here I go. The title is Connecting the Divided Minds in Digital Education, digital class. I say this because we all know that COVID-19 has recently transformed the world, especially in education, because, as you know, that it's the largest disruption to schooling in history. At one point, it is known that the 82% of entire school in the world was shut down simultaneously. So it is a huge experiment on digital classroom has been going on for last almost 3 years. When I went to school, it was a good old days. where the teachers and students are all in the same place, same time. Then ICT came in, and the contents went into computers. But now what we have is both the teachers and students. We all are in the computer. Before, we had a shared experience. We shared the time, we shared the place, and we communicated not only in 5 senses, but even the 6th sense. But now we share only frustration. I say that because we have a great divide that we're all worried about, and through this recent experimentation, this worry is confirmed. Namely that, as Janice mentioned, that digital divide, that the digital education, the online education, is excellent. It's great for the haves, the skilled, and the privileged. But it's really bad for the have-nots, unskilled, and disadvantaged. But there is another great divide, which not too many people talk about. It is really bad for character, collaboration, creativity, commitment, communication, and compassion. Janice mentioned some of the worries. But this divide is really between the brain, the cognitive aspect. The digital education is wonderful for thinking, for sharing thoughts, for transforming information. So to know and to do digital education is great. But to be and to live together, I don't know how good it is. So we have brain versus the heart, which is the feeling part of the education, or that we call affective domain. As you know, that global citizenship is about affective domain activities. So with the digital divide, global education or global citizenship suffers. But the crux of global citizenship is really the divided mind that is the problem. Now, I have tried my best as a professor to carry on the online class, trying to engage students' mind. I have many, many screens to see all my students in the class, online. I even tried something like that you have seen on the screen, where all students are shown almost in a living figure, so to speak, so that I can engage them not just intellectually, cognitively, but emotionally, to share my emotions, my passion for the contents, and to motivate them. See, motivation is the emotional or affective activities. I have even tried on online, offline hybrid classes, trying my best to engage students' mind, but it was extremely frustrating. It's just like getting out of my mind. It was really a mind-boggling experience. Trying to engage students' mind, in order to do that, you have to first know where the mind is. You have to know what the mind is. But many people, when I asked them these questions, they didn't know. So I went on to adventure, trying to find the mind, my mind and students' mind. Those who think that mind is in the head, they think the mind is more about thinking. Then there are people who point their heart. They think mind is more of a feeling. But recent technology called, or the research area called neurocardiology, they say that brain and the heart are independently operated neurologically, and they are interconnected, and they communicate to each other. And the state of connectedness between the thinking and feeling is what we call mind. On the side, let me tell you that mind in Korean is called maum. That's how we translate. But actually, mind has two aspects, maum and 정신. 정신 in Korean is more of a spirit. So in the Western sense of mind, very often they interchange with the spirit. But here, let me focus on what we call the maum part of the mind. Maybe you are kind of a bit of confused right now, so let me give you a very concrete example. I'm going to give you two questions, and you're all going to answer me directly right now. If it's yes, do this sign. If no, make a big cross. Maybe both of you two can do that. Question number one. When you memorized multiplication table when you were young, you memorized in one try. Yes, no? No, no. Okay, both of you know. Yeah, good, good. Second question. You still remember your first kiss? The difference, the why you find it very hard to memorize the multiplication table, but you remember your first kiss or your first date forever, is that emotion is the one that decides what to remember. See, the amygdala that deals with the emotion and hippocampus that deals with memory, they work together side by side, and they are actually in unison. So emotion, any event that evokes a big emotion, brain decides, hey, this is important stuff, let me keep it. If it's dull stuff, it erases it immediately. Now, this is a brain activities, but all the activities that deals with emotion actually transferred through the nervous system and the hormonal system, and it affects your heart the most. So symbolically, brain is the thinking, the cognitive part, and the heart is the affective domain, and the emotion, the center of emotion. And the mind, or the maum, is the connection between the two. Now, cognitive area, the thinking, is in bits, so it's conducive for digitization. So when you talk about thinking, we say you have a very sharp and hard thinking, or original thinking. You have a very unique and very clear thinking. So thinking is all about analysis, differentiation, and is useful for confrontation. Whereas the feeling is all about empathy, compassion. It is connecting. It is integrating. It is unifier. Thinking is divider. Feeling is unifier. Okay, let me give you another proof for that. Let me show you a very, very young child, baby, feeling sad. And I'm going to show you a big grown-up man feeling sad. And I'm going to show you a woman, an Asian woman, feeling sad. No matter what age, no matter what sexes you are, no matter what culture you are at, the emotions are either same or very, very similar. So emotion, the affective domain, is global unifier, whereas a cognition is divider. So there is a great divide there. As I said before, thinking is highly conducive for online digital education, whereas the affective domain is very poor through online and digital education. Now, this is not simply divide, but it is detrimental for creativity. Let me cite you a recent research done by professors at Harvard, UPenn, and one other university that skips my mind. The brain, as we know, is very complex, but it has 3 different levels, simplified in a way, simplified version. We have the limbic system, which deals with life, and we have the pons deals with the life, and the limbic system that deals with emotion, and we have the prefrontal cortex that deals with cognition, thinking. But the brain in a default mode is connected between life, emotion, and not thinking, but somewhere different. It is with the emotion. The brain is connected that way because when you are under stress, under a high-risk situation, then you have a reptilian reaction, which is fight or flight. So brain is ready for this kind of reaction to improve your survivability. When you are thinking, we tend to think that it's all about your prefrontal cortex activities, like a high IQ. But what this research found out was that when you are deep thinking, when you are in a creative mode, not only your prefrontal cortex is activated, but your limbic system is also activated. And the limbic system, I told you, is about emotion. So when you are being creative, you got to have passion, you have to involve intuition, the sixth sense, and you have to have a sense of curiosity and sense of adventure. It's all about the emotional intelligence. When you are under stress, when you are under negative emotion, you end up with a reptilian reaction. So in order to be creative, you got to have positive emotional experience. And the positive emotional experience is where you end up being mindful and caring as well. That's where the citizenship lies. So all the things that deals with character, collaboration, citizenship, communication, and compassion is when you have not only good IQ, but not only good EQ, but when they are connected together, and you end up with what I call mind intelligence. So let me give you how can we engage to improve mind intelligence. There are many different ways to do that, but urgently, I would suggest that we have to do it at least 2 things. All educators need to design not only curriculum content, but learning experience as well. Well, not too many people distinguish these two, but I do. Curriculum content is many teachers will prepare what to teach, how to teach, what to cover, the schedule, what kind of things to give examination. So it's all about content, scheduling, evaluation, and knowledge. It's the cognitive domain. It's the thinking part. So you design a good thinking schedule. Learning experience is affective domain activities. It's all about how to engage students' sense of curiosity, students' sense of adventure. When I talk about this content, what kind of vision the students will encounter in their future? What kind of wisdom that they will end up? It's all about affective domain activities. So when we design both the curriculum content and learning experience, we can engage their mind. All along we mostly engaged thinking part, but then when we are sharing the same time and same place, so we are embodied together, then whether we realize or not, we can engage them on an emotional level. But online, through digital education, that part is very, very difficult and challenging. So we have to especially give a lot of effort in designing the learning experience. It will not happen automatically. Second, educators need to learn and practice what's called emotion coaching to connect with students. You see, what we want for citizenship especially is character, collaboration, communication, compassion, those kind of things, right? And very often we will tell students, we will tell them how to behave. We instruct, we explain, we advise, we suggest, and if they don't listen, we discipline them, and we sometimes order them what to do. These kind of activities that we engage in is what is called behavior coaching. We instruct how to behave directly. But I cannot get into much detail, but this kind of behavior coaching is things that students will not listen to you. They will think that you are an old person who doesn't understand them, who have no idea about your future. So they will reject all these good suggestions and instructions that you give them so that they can behave and become not only a good global citizen, but to be creative and to be successful in the future. So the second method of instruction, the second method to lead students to behave is what is called emotional coaching. This is a technique, so to speak, developed by Dr. John Gottman. Before you give students instructions how to behave, you got to attune with them emotionally first. You provide support, emotional support. You make emotional connection with them first, and then you suggest, and they will follow you. So in order to do this, there is a precondition. All the teachers must have the character, collaborative abilities, and communication abilities, and compassion. Namely, they have to demonstrate global citizenship to teach students the global citizenship. There is a great proverb in Korea. If adults instruct children, they resist, they reject. But if you show them, they follow you. So in order to do the emotional coaching, you have to be emotionally attuned yourself first. So I have given a short talk how to connect the divided mind in digital classroom. And as we all know, that there's a great digital divide of social divide, technical divide, sexual divide, and many, many divides. But my concern is the division between the cognitive domain and affective domain. And digital classroom is wonderful for cognitive activities, but very poor in affective activities. So we have to give special effort in designing classroom experience and in carrying out the classroom, you got to use emotional coaching to move students' mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Cho. I think that, again, we finished with Alton's challenge around the urgency, and I think your challenge around on how we need to really look at this inevitable digital learning that we are going into, and increasingly will be a part of our lives, but how we deeply focus on a different way of looking at how we learn. And then I think your call for focusing on the learning experience and distinguishing between the curriculum and bringing those together for mindful learning in many ways, I think is such an important thing. And I think, if we're honest, most of us don't do that well. And so there's we have to admit it and now begin to really put effort into those learning experiences, both on and off the classroom. So thank you very much for putting it on the table. And I'm assured that there will be some important comments and questions at the end, which we'll need to address. So thank you, Professor Cho. And then finally, we'll turn to Lisa van Wyk, who's come all the way from South Africa to be with us, who is the Global Communications Manager at the World Wide Web Foundation. And as Professor Cho said, an expert in communication. So Lisa, thank you very much for being the final word.
I don't know how to use a microphone, so that's a bad start. Hello, everyone. So I actually changed what I was going to speak about. What am I doing wrong? Oh, I need the pointer. Thank you. I actually changed what I was going to speak about when I realized that a few things had happened over the past 2 weeks and will be happening, which kind of highlighted a few challenges that we face when we deal with media and information literacy and GCED in terms of how people approach digital space more generally. One of those things which happened was that this man, Elon Musk, who's scary looking, took over Twitter. And we all knew that it was going to happen. And we all knew that it would make the news when he did. And last week, he did acquire a platform which has 450 million users. And while there has been certainly plenty of discussion about what this means for a huge platform of users and what it might mean for freedom of expression and things like that, the majority of commentary has really been based on the fact that he's a sort of eccentric billionaire. He does some weird stuff. And that's really been what the general conversation has been about. It hasn't really been about the mechanics of a huge social media platform. And the other thing which is about to happen is that this year's IGF, the Internet Governance Forum, is about to take place in Addis in Ethiopia. And even though we regularly see sort of protests and freedom of expression protests in response to events which happen in places which are at odds with the ideas of freedom of expression and things like that, we haven't really seen, even from freedom of expression and internet freedom advocates, much of an outcry over the fact that Addis and Ethiopia, which is one of the worst violators of freedom of expression and internet and digital rights, is about to host the world's foremost meeting where internet policy makers and global sort of digital thinkers and tech activists come together. And the irony of that and how completely unsuitable it is. I mean, you can compare the lack of outcry around this to something like what people are currently saying about Qatar and the World Cup. There's very, very little happening. In fact, most people don't even know what the Internet Governance Forum is. And for me, that's a really, really strange thing when you think about the role that the internet and the digital world more generally plays in the lives of everyone. For me, it really reveals that people just don't understand or aren't willing to engage with what happens in the digital world, outside of content, outside of the platforms they directly engage with. People are not interested or are excluded from or intimidated by the sort of technology and structures which shape our digital world and therefore shape our lives, given the fact, as the professor has just pointed out, that we are very much living in a digital world and that so many of our activities have moved into the digital space almost completely. And for me, that's a very interesting thing, especially if one thinks of the idea of global citizenship, if one thinks of the idea of digital citizenship, because we understand full well that in order to be an active citizen in a world that we a world that we engage with, a world that we participate in, we need to understand the structures that govern the world that we live in. For us to take action against things which are unjust, for us to even be able to engage with the processes that govern our lives, we need to understand the structures, at least in part. And people have a tendency to think that the digital world, because it's tech, because it's something which is outside of our everyday lives, except for a few people who work and live in this sort of tech space, we don't engage. And I'm not a person who works in technology by any means, but I understand through my work and through people I've interacted with and training I've done, that there is a desperate need for people to be more engaged with the structures. And one of the reasons for this, beyond anything, is because just like in an offline world, just like in our sort of our lives of old, which were analog rather than online, for change to happen, for people to take control of their space, they need to have some sense of the structures that govern that space. And we are faced with quite a strange contradiction, which I'm sure the professor will agree with. Young people for whom the digital world has been all they've ever known, they're born into a digital space. We used to call them digital natives, but that's not a great term anymore. The idea is that people who are born into a digital space and who experience the internet and other digital platforms around them as sort of a given, as sort of an inevitability, as sort of an invisible force around them. They're more comfortable using the platforms, they're more comfortable in the space, but they don't notice the structure. So those who are most deeply involved in using the space are the least likely to even be aware of the deliberate choices that are being made in the structures around them. And at the moment, as you've seen already in the presentations, media and information literacy tends to focus very much on the end user, on the content, and how one engages with the content, rather than with how one engages with the structures. And those who are more aware of the structures, because potentially they're older and they've had to adapt to a changing digital environment and a changing digital world, so the teachers, they may well recognize the structures, but they don't have the vocabulary to talk about it. And in most cases, you can't expect people to fully explain technical structures which in the digital world. I mean, it's a specialist area. And I did some media and information literacy training online a while back for AppCU. And one of the questions that I got from teachers who had taken part in the training was that they didn't feel equipped to speak about media information literacy topics in a digital world because some of the digital terminology, some of the digital technology had just moved too fast and they hadn't been able to keep up with it. And they also couldn't tell, given this very fast-moving world, what was relevant or not to their learners. You know, it's one thing to talk about engaging with information. It's one thing to be engaging with digital media, social media platforms, to a certain extent, online harms, abuses, disinformation, misinformation, ways of protecting yourself. But it's quite another thing to kind of hear terminology about Web3 and blockchain and all these things that you can't imagine when you hear those terms and you hear them being used, if they will ever be relevant to your classrooms. And it's a very difficult thing to work out. Which also raises a question, how do you predict what is going to be important? The world is moving really, really fast. You know, things like AI, when we first started speaking about it as part of the digital landscape and part of a sort of a digital world, it was quite specialist. We are now seeing that everyone engages with AI, whether they realize it or not, in the digital space all the time. If you are using a social media platform, you are engaging with AI, because things you say are being moderated by AI, the things that are being served to you as a consumer, they are being moderated by AI. And so AI is very, very relevant, even though many years ago we wouldn't have understood that it would be. So this is Tim Berners-Lee. So he's kind of my boss. He founded the organization I work for, but he also invented the World Wide Web. And the reason I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson about the web and about the technology which led to the digital world as we now know it is because it's very important to break it down back to where people will realize that there's nothing inherent or automatic about the digital structures that surround us. They are very much a result of human invention, human choices, and when you are more aware of the fact that they are human-led choices, you can be empowered to challenge the issues, the problems, the dangers, knowing that you're not fighting some robotic monolith, which I think so often the digital world is framed at. You are living in an environment which is the net result of a lot of human choices, individual choices that have been made by people to make the web to make the digital space look like it does. So Tim Berners-Lee in 1989 was working for CERN in Switzerland, and he essentially connected two pieces of content across two computers. The technology to connect computers already existed, but he was the one who made what we call the web. So the idea that content which is hosted in servers is accessible. It's not just things that are linked like email. And what he did was he realized that this was an incredible opportunity for humanity. And he realized that the idea of shared knowledge, which had been so difficult for so many generations to kind of come to a way of doing it, was suddenly something that was quite accessible. And so he didn't patent the code, which he used to sort of start web content. He gave it sort of as an open source piece of content to the world. And at the time, he said that you can't propose that something be a universal space and at the same time keep control of it. And unfortunately, those words, which are very idealistic and sort of say a lot about the original vision of the web, have unfortunately been quite prophetic in that the web and the content that is on it is deeply, deeply controlled. It is owned because the web is now, for the most part, a consumer entity which is run along commercial interests. I know we speak about media information literacy as something which really tackles things like disinformation and misinformation and algorithms which are potentially politically motivated or have a political impact. But it's very, very important to remember that at its core, the decisions that are made around what we access on the web, they're far less arcane or far less sort of mysterious. They're often just commercial. Because the web is, as Twitter is with Elon Musk, now a commercial entity and a conglomeration of commercial entities with commercial and economic results at their core. At the time that Tim Berners-Lee invented the web, he came up with these principles, which should be the basis for an open web, but are more broadly the basis for open sharing of information, especially in a digital world. So his ideals, and the ideals of so many people who work on the web as a tool for good, have not really changed. There is the notion of decentralization, which is that there is no conduit through which information has to be passed before it appears on the web. You are free to express yourself, and everyone is free to become a content producer. It is no longer a thing which is specifically in the hands of media producers. It is non-discriminatory. Anyone can access the web, ideally, but we know that this is not true in a world of, as many have mentioned before, of digital divides, of incredible inequality and digital inequality. We do not want the web to be run by a group of experts, i.e. the people that are running the large spaces that we currently see. We want it to be open source. We want it to be something which really reflects the needs of people who use technology and who share information. And we want universality, and we also see a break in that. As soon as you've got Ethiopia shutting down the internet for a while, as soon as you see China taking its content off the web and creating essentially separate internets, you lose universality. You use the idea that anyone in the world can speak and share information with anyone in the world. So the principles of the web, unfortunately, as we have seen, and as Tim said himself, is the web as he envisaged it, we have not yet seen it. It has never really come to pass as he imagined it when he gave it to the world. And I don't mean that Tim Berners-Lee and his visions are saintly when I speak about those things, but it is the idea that the web was really founded on principles which are idealistic. So these men. The problem with the web, and as MIL will constantly remind us, is that we live in a world, and especially now that we are understanding that the web is something that is built and is invented and is deliberately, choices are made to make it look the way it does, it also reflects the people who make it. And at the moment, unfortunately, these are the people who kind of run it. So they kind of have a similar thing going on. Which begs the question of who exactly is missing from this picture. Because if digital space reflects the architects of that space, i.e. the world that we are living in reflects the architects of that space, who is missing from that picture? And what would it look like if the people that were behind the architecture of the web looked very different? We live in an unequal world, and we know that the digital divide is great, and you will hear again and again in this conference that the digital divide is huge. Earlier, Janice reflected a statistic about how many people are online and offline. And it must be said that the statistic that was used is a very generous statistic. The ITU, which is the International Telecommunications Union, which puts out the UN statistics for internet penetration and internet usage, uses a very, very low bar for actual connectivity. And although we are able to say that a certain number of people, 2/3 of the world, use the web, that includes people who use the web potentially once a year, or have none of what we would call meaningful connectivity. Meaningful connectivity is what we are aspiring to, so that people can engage with the web and, most importantly, become familiar with the web. Else, power does not shift. And at the moment, we are sitting with a situation where 52% of the world has low grade, at least, meaningful connectivity. And so nearly half the world is completely offline by meaningful connectivity standards. And we know who those people are who are offline. It reflects other inequalities more broadly across the world. It is low-income countries versus high-income countries, but even within countries there are gender imbalances, there are economic imbalances, and there are language imbalances. This is Christina. She's a young woman I worked with on a course that was aimed at increasing digital literacy amongst young kids, but who we then also used as a story where we were sharing stories. We love telling stories for the same reason, Professor, that you like it, emotion and thinking together to make people remember things. So we told her story to advocate for meaningful connectivity. And Christina loves the web. She loves the internet. But she doesn't see herself reflected in the web. So there's no motivation for her to better capacitate herself or to reach out across the divide because she doesn't see the benefits in the web. And media information literacy has to kind of address the fact that it's not just a case of skill setting. It's about people feeling excluded from digital space, which means that they will not practice. They will not put the things that they learn into practice because A, they don't have the opportunity, but also the need to be online is not seen as vitally important. Gosh, I thought I had nothing to say. And there's a fantastic quote by William Gibson, who is a science fiction writer, which I always use whenever I can, which is, "The future has already arrived, it is just not yet evenly distributed." But the reality is, like I said, Christina loves the internet. She sleeps with her phone under her bed, as I do. I sleep with my phone under my bed. And her connection with information is really, really personal, as that has happened with digital space. We have the whole world's information on our fingertips. It is a potentially very intimate relationship we have. And I know that as a person who deals with messaging, as a person who deals with the way that people receive information, as you said, expert in communication, that it is very, very difficult when people are close to their devices, are close to the digital world, living in a digital world, to step back and actually realize that it could look different, that the way it is now is not inevitable, that Christina could be involved in the creation of content, that Christina can be involved in the creation of the web architecture itself, if given the chance, and that would be something that she needs to fight for. And we also sit in a situation where there are so many paradoxes about the web as a result of all these inequalities and as a result of the structures and the issues around the structures that exist. You know, it is my job day to day to talk about the web as a human right, to make sure that people are accessing the web, that people are not kept offline. There is no such thing as just offline, it is actively kept offline. But at the same time, as I say that, I have to deal with the knowledge that we are dealing with a poisoned well, that we are trying to advocate for access to the web, but the web is not perfect. And so we are trying to cover that contradiction at all times. And I don't know what the answer to that contradiction is. I don't know how to solve that contradiction. But I do know that there is something very important about just revealing, I suppose, that the way things are not the way things need to be, and removing some of the mythos and removing some of the, I suppose, the mystery around what makes the web the way it is, and reminding everyone that, you know, we want certain principles to be present in the way that we engage with the web. There's no reason that we cannot insert those into the production and the architecture of the web itself. So that's where I'll leave that.
Thank you, Lisa. You know, I think a few things, as all the speakers, a few things stood out for me, and I'm sure for everyone else in different ways. But this idea of that the biggest users of the web, young people, are not necessarily they're the ones that are least likely able to actually understand the structures, and then those who are not using it, perhaps as myself, kind of recognize these structures, but yet we feel disempowered in able to really actually shift and change. And unless, as you said, we actually understand the structures of things, we don't know, we'll never be able to change things. And I think this almost vision that you put forward, that until we all see ourselves in the web, the human right isn't available to everyone. So we have about 4 minutes, 5 minutes left, and because we're all in the room together, I wonder if, first of all, if there are any burning questions that either of you and Alton, if you are still online, whether you have for either any of the speakers. If not, I have some, but I thought I'd turn to you if you have anything.
Yeah, just briefly, just to comment, really excellent presentations in this panel, and really strong complementarity in terms of the different foci, you know, of the presenters. Just two quick comments on Professor Cho. You know, Professor Cho said that the thinking part of our brain, you know, leads to divides. You know, whereas the emotional part of the brain leads to more solidarity. And I don't know if you could elaborate a little bit on that, Professor Cho, because I question that, because we need both thinking and emotions. And you know, in fact, it's the thinking and the emotion comes together that brings together the solidarity. And then for Lisa, again, excellent presentation. Lisa pointed out that media and information literacy tends to focus only on the users and not so much enable them to understand the structures. You know, just to point out, Lisa, that in fact, understanding the structures is a central part of media and information literacy. You know, understanding the rules of media and digital platform in sustainable development and in society, how they're designed, how they work, how they operate, what drives them is a big part of media and information literacy. And it is captured in this resource, you know, that we have developed. So this is just what I wanted to add. But thank you again for edifying me with your presentations. I learned a lot.
Professor Cho, do you want to ask? And then
Alton, you are very correct. Cognitive aspects and affective domain, the thinking and feeling, they are not totally separate. It's not as if black and white. My point was that thinking specializes in dividing analysis, whereas the feeling is more of a connection, so unifier. So I was emphasizing their specialties rather than they are 100% dividing and 100% unifier. I don't mean that. Of course, you can share your thoughts and come to agreements. So let's not see it as a black and white, but you are correct.
Thank you, Professor. Lisa, do you want to respond at all to what Elton had brought up?
Yeah, I do understand completely the MIL and focus on structures. What I really mean about the structures in terms of the digital space and tech specifically is, I suppose, yes, we understand the structures, but I think we take those structures as given rather than focusing on the fact that they are man-made, that they are choices, and that the structure itself of the web, of the architecture of this massive digital space is not the way it is because it has to be that way. It's that it was invented step by step like a car is invented. And that it could look different. I mean, there's no reason we can't bake GCED principles into the structure of the web and not just teach people to react to them.
Thank you. I decided, I know I had questions, but I decided I'm going to change that because I have the mic. What I'd like to do, though, at the end, because our time is running out, is just, we have a global community who've joined us online, who are using these very structures and this technology to listen to you, to share with each other. So I wonder if there's from each of you, to put you on the spot, is there one hope that you have that you'd like to leave for this community who are listening and watching and following this journey with us?
I think most of us want success in life, but I would like to point out that unless we are happy, we are never successful. So let us all strive to become happy together. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa, and then I'll go to Elton last.
I suppose based on everything I've been thinking about, is I suppose I would just hope that people are less intimidated by the space that they live in, and sort of feel empowered to take control, both of what they produce, but also what they use and how it is built.
Thank you. And then Elton, the final word, final hope.
Well, thank you so much, Dylan. The final hope from UNESCO connects to what Professor Tro and Lisa emphasized in their presentation. And I do this through, as we speak to the global audience, I do this through reminding us about Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states that all human beings are born free. All human beings are born free. They are endowed with reason and conscience. And it is this reason and conscience that should stir them to act towards each other in brotherly kindness. This is Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, not my words. I would add to act towards others, their brothers and sisters, towards others with not just brotherly kindness, but with love. It is this reason and conscience that we are endowed with that media and information literacy and global citizenship education seeks to stir, and we hope that this presentation from all the experts will stir this reason and conscience in you, the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elton. Thank you, Janice, who isn't with us right now, but thank you, Janice, for bringing us closer into an important resource. Thank you to Professor Cho for getting us to the heart. I want to say the heart of the matter, because it was there to be taken, but to really realizing that we've got further to go in engaging in the emotional aspect of this online learning. For Lisa for drawing that curtain aside and letting us see that we have further to go in terms of everyone being seen, but also that if we actually understand those structures, we can actually start to make some change. And then to Elton for reminding us that we're in it at the moment, and that means there's an urgency for us to really get these tools into classrooms. For those who've joined us from all over the world, it's been a fascinating discussion. I've been honored to be sitting amongst these four distinguished people. The next session, there'll be a 60-minute break, and then at 19:40 GMT +9, which is Seoul time, the concurrent session 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3 will begin. So you've got a little time to grab something to eat, grab some coffee, or whatever it is that you drink in your time zone right now. Thanks very much. See you all soon.